house?
Well, I was a problem child, as most of us chefs are.
Yes.
I was incredibly dyslexic, and nobody knew it. So I went through my whole schooling as basically feeling like it was a jail sentence, and was just couldn't wait to get out of jail, basically, because I was like, I just got to get to work because this school stuff sucks. I was terrible at it. So when I finally graduated high school, I moved to New York, and I was crashing on my brother's couch, him and his girlfriend's couch, and I was sort of became a handyman around town. I mean, I was his girlfriend, born and raised in New York, knew a lot of people that were getting married and having kids, and like needed baby rooms painted, a closet built, and
Okay.
I've always been pretty handy with tools, so I could do that kind of stuff. So, and in New York, it's tough to find a handyman back in the day. I think it was, there was no Task Rabbit, so I was basically
Yes.
Task Rabbit for my brother's girlfriend's friends, which was kind of funny. And I because I knew I wasn't going to go to college. When I went to ask if I should go to college at the counselor, they looked at me and laughed and said, "You better go
Uh-huh.
get a job." So, and after a while, I felt bad. I wasn't paying rent, so I would cook dinner every night for my brother and his girlfriend, and I would, fuck around in the kitchen. I loved it. It was always
Yeah,
like, "Oh, cool,
yeah.
we're gonna have a good meal," making mussels. I remember she actually reminded me recently, about there was a time that I was into soufflés, and for a whole week, I just made crab soufflé, cheese soufflé, chocolate. I was like, I kept making soufflés. And then at
Nice.
one point, my brother was like, "You seem to like to cook. Why don't you go to cooking school?" And I was like, "What? What's that?"
Uh-huh.
I'd
Yeah.
never heard of it. So I ended up going to a 3-month cooking school because I found, it was sort of the stars aligned. I got something in the mail that I had to pay taxes on $6,500 in a bank account in Boston, which I didn't know I had. So I called my
Okay.
father and said, "What is this? Why are you keeping your money in my name in banks in Boston? Why am I paying taxes on this?" And he goes, "Oh no, that's money your grandmother left you for your education." So I hung up the phone and I called the bank and I said, "I'm going to go get educated." There was a school, it was called Peter Cump's, it's now called ICE, and
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think it was $4,000 or $4,500 for the 3-month professional cooking course. And so I went and signed up, and then I had an extra 1,500 to spend on myself for 3 months, and for the scotch at the bar, so I needed
Exactly.
something there. And I went to cooking school, and I just, I was terrible at the written stuff,
Sure.
but all the practical stuff, I was great. I loved it. I genuinely enjoyed it. And so
Mhm.
after that, my teacher, Catherine Alfred, she said, "Okay, well, now you're going to go do an apprenticeship." And I signed up, and I got a place I went to Paris, went and crashed on another friend's couch in Paris. I was going to go do an apprenticeship in a restaurant. I was there for about 2 weeks, and it was like the worst restaurant you'd ever seen. The food was terrible. I was like,
Oh,
I can't
really?
stay here. And they just wanted free labor. I'm like, I'm out of here. So then
Was
I
it just
ended up.
like some crappy bistro? Like,
Oh, it was just, I mean, I remember the chef de partie and the guy making all the sauces was sitting there smoking a cigarette the whole time in the kitchen. I'm like,
yeah,
this is
yeah, yeah.
disgusting. So I left, and then I went and goofed off for quite a while, for about a year. Moved to Italy, went and hung out there in some other friends' houses, and then I went to, then I moved. Might have been a girl might have been involved. Moved to London for a
Yeah, you gotta
year,
follow the girl,
just
man. Everybody has to
goofing
follow that
off.
girl.
And then I came back to New York, and I finally got I walked back to the kitchen, this cooking school, and she looked at me. She goes, "Where the hell have you been?"
Mhm.
And anyway, there was another guy in the class named what was his name? Ed Farron. And he's like, "Oh, I work at Prefix with Terrence Brennan. We're looking for cooks. Why don't you come with me to work after class?" So I went
Nice.
down there, and after a couple interviews, I got the job, and I worked there for almost 2 years.
So that was
So that's
really
how
your
it started in New
introductory
York.
into, yeah, New York fine dining. Um, talk about Prefix. I mean, Upper East Side, or was that like Madison Park?
I was
Where
on
was that?
18th Street. It was on 18th
Oh,
Street
okay.
between 5th and 6th on the south side of the street. I think it's a bookstore now. I was there for almost 2 years. Joey Fortunato, who is still a good friend of mine, was a sous chef, and the other sous chef was David Pasternak, who had Esca for many years and
Hell
was
yeah.
still a good friend. And well, they screamed at me for 2 years. That's the
Sure,
way
of
I learned.
course.
And I have a lot of wonderful stories from back in the day. And then
Yes.
after about 2 years, Dave Pasternak came up to me and he goes, "All right, you're done." I was like, "What do you mean I'm done?" He goes, "You learned everything here. You should go work somewhere else." So I once again packed my bags and I moved to Paris. I found another friend with a couch, and I bought the Michelin guide and walked around Paris, and I started with all the 3 Michelin star restaurants, knocking on their door,
Mhm.
and they looked at me like I
Mhm.
was completely crazy.
Yeah.
They're like, "This is not
But
how it works."
you did speak French at that point, right?
Yeah,
You
I
so
speak
you
French
do
and
speak
Italian.
French,
I
yeah.
grew up speaking all 3
Okay.
languages, so
Okay.
that was a good thing. But I ended up Chef Paco at l'Amboiserie sort of pointed me in the right direction, and I ended up getting a job in a one-star Michelin restaurant called Le Miraville. Gilles Lepierre was the chef, and Jean-Pierre Brault was the sous chef, and I was there a little over 2 years, and I learned a lot. That was like trial by fire. I got thrown into this thing. It was amazing.
Yeah,
My
tell us some of
favorite
the like, tell us, like, a memory that you love or you remember from I don't know if you love it,
Well,
but
my first
it's
thing was I had gotten a job before that, and it was only for a week, and there wasn't enough work, and I was like, it was just another crappy restaurant right off of the Champs-Élysées Inn. So when I got this job at Le Miraville, I my the chef de cuisine, Jean-Pierre Brault, was probably only 2 years older than I was, but he'd been cooking since he was 14. So
yeah,
I felt
yeah.
like I was way behind the 8 ball, basically. And I looked at him, and I can still remember in the office downstairs, he was like, I said, don't hire me unless you really have work for me. I want to learn. And I remember he was a little shorter than I was. He got up on his tiptoes and he goes, "Oh, I got work for you, kid." I'm like, okay, I've started this off right. Anyway, my first job, they had me as the commis de poisson. So I was like the assistant at the fish station.
Sure.
And there was this guy, I can still remember him. He was sort of a larger, burly guy. And the area where we worked was very small. I was right next to the window. The stove was over here. So I was sort of the commis. So I was doing his, his whatever crap work that he didn't want
Mhm,
to do.
mhm, mhm.
And after a week, I was like, I don't know why this guy's here. He's so lazy. He doesn't do, I do all the work. I'm like,
Uh,
I could do both jobs. I don't need, like, if I could get him out of the way, I could do both jobs. So after about a week, I went back down to the office and I said, "Chef, if you want to fire that guy on the fish station, I'll do both jobs and you don't have to pay me more." And he looked at me like I was a nut. He's like, "What are you talking about?"
uh,
Anyway, the next morning I come to work, the guy's gone. And
oh,
he
hell
looks at
yeah,
me and
that's
goes,
awesome.
"It's all yours. Good luck." And I was like,
Yeah, yeah,
"Great." I was so excited. And then everybody in the kitchen's looking at me like, "Who the fuck is this guy?"
right, yeah, well, you prove yourself, right? I mean, you probably people looked at you like, "Alright, this guy's for real."
I worked there, and I worked there probably at that station for about 6 months, and then all of a sudden, the pastry chef, pastry was downstairs. There was a dumbwaiter that brought the desserts up, and, the pastry chef broke his ankle on the stairs, and
Okay.
he looks at me and he goes, "Yo, it's your turn. Go down." I'm like,
Oh,
"I
no.
don't do pastry. I don't make pastry. I hated pastry class. I didn't like pastry." And in pastry department, you didn't just make pastry. You made all the bread, you made all the ice creams, you made and all the desserts. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and it was like we had this old school ice cream machine that like it spun inside of like antifreeze, and you'd have to scoop it out with this thing. And you had to spin the ice creams for lunch and dinner. And in France, you
Okay.
work both services. So
Uh-huh.
you would come to work in the morning, you would respin all the ice creams. You'd go after lunch, you'd melt them all down, you'd respin them again for dinner. And
Wow,
you had to
okay.
make all the bread. So that was and then my first time I had to make puff pastry downstairs. So it was downstairs, and there was basically they gave me a little box with recipe cards, and
Yeah.
I still remember I made 12 kilos of puff pastry. And you know what it's like, right? You make it, and
Sure.
the only time you really know it's going to work is when you put it in the oven and like
Yeah.
stand there and stare at it and hope it
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
up. And
yeah.
I realized I made my first round of puff pastry. It was all garbage. I was like, "Oh man,
Oh,
he's gonna
man.
kill me. I don't know how to make puff pastry. I did it once in cooking school. What the fuck?"
Right, right.
And I never made this much of it. And so then he was very nice. The chef came down and he taught me. So then it was good. So then I did pastry for quite a while, about 6 months, and then I moved back upstairs and worked the saucier station, and I did work the whole kitchen. I was going to leave after about a year and a half, and then it was going to be like the summer, and I said, I'm going to quit. I'm going to go to Italy. I'm going to go work in an Italian restaurant. I'm going to go, go down there, live down there for a couple of years. And the chef looked at me and he goes, "You're not allowed to leave." I go, "Why not?" He goes, "Well, because we're going on vacation, and you're the only one that knows the whole kitchen, so you have to stay through the summer."
Ah!
While the chef took the vacation and while the sous chef took the vacation. So then I was like, "Oh, Jesus." And he goes, "All right, if you stay," the chef he was good friends with Alain Ducasse. He goes, "If you stay, I'll get you an apprenticeship at Alain Ducasse." So I was like, "Oh my God, if I go back to America and I tell people I didn't stay an extra 6 months to get a
Mhm.
3 month stage at Ducasse, they're gonna think I'm crazy." So I
Yeah.
ended up staying.
Yeah, this is hey everyone. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Chef Radio Podcast. If you like what you hear, check us out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll hear full-length episodes of me interviewing chefs from all over the country and the world. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that stuff. Share it with your fellow chefs and food enthusiasts. So until next time, I'm Eli Kulp. Thank you for watching. And remember to keep pushing yourself to be better and be kind to each other.